All right, so what we'd like to do today is go back to chapter 9 and read all the way through to chapter 13. No, we can't really do that. In the interest of time, we won't. But as I've advocated on the daily prayer, the congregation of prayer, alongside what we're doing there, it would be really helpful for you to read larger sections of the Bible. And I posted on our website, but it went out on Facebook and an email, some different reading plans, different ways to do that. If you have a study Bible, sometimes they'll offer like a 2-year plan in them. I know the Concordia the Lutheran Study Bible has a 2-year plan in the front that you can use. There's other plans. Basically, why do we have plans? Because if we don't have plans, we don't have discipline. Right? So the plan just kind of orders it so that you can accomplish that which you've set out to do. In this case, to read through the Bible. But one of the advantages there of reading, say, even if you do something simple, like read 6 chapters of the Old Testament and 3 chapters of the New Testament, you'll read the whole Bible twice a year, I think, if you do that. If you read 6 chapters at once, you're going to get a much better idea of the kind of the contour of the narrative, what's happening chapter to chapter. Because remember, chapters and verses are not original to the text. You can actually buy single books of the Bible without chapter and verse. And just print it as individual volumes. It does, yeah, psychologically, in your mind. Just like a 2-column Bible doesn't read like a single-column Bible. 2-column reads like a newspaper. Like psychologically, it has a different effect upon your brain and the way you receive the information. So, yeah. So if you can find, I don't have any recommendations on that because I haven't done the research myself, but single-column Bibles are preferred. And then, like the Greek, it's just a big block of text. The Hebrew, just one column, right to left. So anyway, the point was that for us to understand what's happening in 13, we kind of need to go back and see where we started. Because remember, 1 through 8 were the visions and oracles, remember? And then 9 kind of started a whole other section. And it began with, we'll just summarize it. I'm going to use this sheet because I try to remember what's going on. Where were we? There was a summary in here, and I thought, that's helpful. Let's use that. Of course, I won't be able to find it now that I'm looking for it. Started with warfare, remember? Against all sorts of people, right? We had Shadrach, Damascus, Tyre, Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron. I'm just going fast here. Don't look at the screen and get motion sick. Ashdod, Philistines. Then the king comes, and you recognize this part. Zechariah 9, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, the daughter of Jerusalem, the Holy King is coming to you. Right? So we hear this on Palm Sunday. All right? And then, so here he comes, and then God will save his people. But how's he going to do it? How is he going to save them in that day as the flock of the people? By waging warfare against all who stand against God's people. Right? That's physical, of course. Right? All the nations that came out against the people whom God had chosen. Of course, for us as Christians, it's theological as much, right? We have our own kind of triad of enemies. That's even better. Send out the devil, right? As the third one is. All right, so then, let's see. We can do chapter 10. We can skip over. Again, this is God restoring his people, but then they go against him, right? And so then he brings desolation upon them. This has already happened, as we talked about when we talked about chapter 11. It had already happened, past tense. So the prophet goes backwards. This is the exile then ultimately in Babylon. Because they had false shepherds, right? Shepherds who actually fed the flock for slaughter, who delivered them because they failed to speak the truth to them. We talked a lot about this. Right? They made the 30 pieces of silver. That sounds familiar. Right? So Judas is an example of someone who is a part of God's family and yet rebels against God. Right? For indeed I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for those who are cut off, nor seek the young, nor heal those that are broken, nor feed those that still stand. but he will eat the flesh of the fats, right? So this is, I guess, who conquered the land? Who's the Babylonian king that conquered? Here's the fun name. Nebuchadnezzar, right? Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar. Right? So remember, shepherd can mean a couple different things. But one of the things it always is king. So the shepherds are called the kings. So if we have a false shepherd, or if we have this foolish shepherd, the shepherd comes and tears them apart, who's a worthless shepherd, that's Nebuchadnezzar. Alright? Then, God's going to save his people. So this is prophetic. He's going to restore them, bring them back to Jerusalem. We studied this last week and the week before. Right? He brings desolation, or he brings confusion and madness upon Persia, as we talked about now, with the horses, right? And then, let's see, where did we leave off last week? We finished the whole chapter. And then he's going to bring them back into the house. And the house of David shall be like God, and the angel of the Lord will be before them. And that it shall be in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. All right. But then we talked about John quotes this at length. They will look on me whom they pierced. Right. That's John 19 and John 20. So even though he's seeking to restore the people, how does he do it? Zechariah has it all outlined for us. He brings the people back and he restores them, not by an earthly king, not just the blood of the son of David, but by his pierced one. Right? So we as Christians understand this quite well, is that God gathers his people, he restores the nation, he brings the family or the tribes back together through Jesus' shed blood. Right? You heard that in the sermon today. And this is prophetic, not of the nation of Israel. Because here's the dirty little secret that Israel never tells you. Israelites. Modern day Israel never tells you. Is that they've always been captive to everyone since Babylon. Even when they were returned by Persia, they were still under Persian captivity. They were just allowed to go back home. So they didn't get their freedom back. They just got their homeland back, kind of. Right? And then the Greeks, we talked about this here at prayer at home. Then the Greeks, Alexander the Great, came and conquered them, the Persians, and now they were under Greek occupation. You read about this in the apocryphal books, the in-between books. And then you also have then the Romans conquer the Greeks. So by the time of Jesus, they're not free people. Say, we've never been enslaved to anyone, the Pharisees say to Jesus. Like, you've been enslaved, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and now Rome, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Never mind Egypt before that. Like, are you crazy? And they are. And I think this is important for us as Christians. This will be a good lead into what we're going to look at today. Is that, we talked about this in the daily prayer online yesterday, is that one of the deceits is that we make that same claim that we are not enslaved to anyone or anything. Right? We're free people. Now, I mean, I'm not just talking in an earthly sense, which, see, nodding your head. It's just exactly true, even though we like to think that we're free people. We're not. We're enslaved. Just a different, it's the best kind of slavery. It's the one where you're ignorant of it, mostly. And so you just be naive, fat, dumb, and happy, right? And also they get away with it without anyone noticing, right? That's the best kind of slavery. To be enslaved without even knowing it. All right? If you're going to be enslaved, at least, be able to think that you're not, I guess. Right? But that kind of naivete, then we apply spiritually, too. So we come and we say, oh no, I'm not enslaved to sin. I'm not a slave to sin. I'm not, my flesh does not hold me captive. Hold me down or whatever. Right? The devil doesn't. I don't live in the devil's kingdom. You're like, no, you don't. By faith, you've been set free, you've been forgiven, right? That's the forgiveness of sins. You've been brought into Christ's holy church, you have his word. And yet, we live this double existence, don't we? Because we turn around, turn away from Christ's word, away from his church, away from the gifts that he gives, by which he gives forgiveness, and then we're right back where we were before. As Paul calls it, like a dog returning to its vomit. Which I don't know, dogs are dumb. Right? That's what he's saying. You're dumb. Luther even says it straight out, but unfortunately it's kind of insulting now. You can't use this word. Not in school, you can't call somebody stupid. Used to be teachers could call their students stupid. You can't do that anymore. So it's like using that other word that says are. That refers to people who are developmentally delayed. Can't use that word anymore. But anyway, Luther does. You are stupid. You're stupid people because you don't listen to God. Right? Sin makes you stupid, it says. So, they need to be set free. They're going to be set free by the house of David, right? By the Son, the one whom they pierced, his only Son, the firstborn, right? And on that day, which is the day of the cross, there shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, like when Megiddo was destroyed, right? We talked about that already. Oh, you missed that. You weren't here last week. We talked about it last week. By the way, Megiddo then gets picked up for Armageddon in the Revelation. Yeah. So it's just, you can go and read about it. It is in 2 Kings 23:29. We read it last week. All right. And then we get to finally some good news. All right, because we had Good Friday. Now what? Patrick or James? That's not what the cups are for. Pastor? You color on the sheets. All right. So, chapter 13, the cleansing fountain. Which made me think of one of the hymns we had today. Glory be to Jesus, right? So, lots of talk about his blood poured out, right? All right. Somebody else want to read?
Which?
Chapter 13.
I can do it.
All right.
I can't see from here.
I know.
Can I just read mine?
So since you mentioned it, yeah, you can. But I do want to replace this with a bigger screen so you can read it.
That would be nice.
And then like a separate dry erase board, maybe just one on wheels that can roll around. Yeah, because if you get one of the bigger screens like we have over at school, all the classrooms have at school, you can actually mark up on the screen. Yeah, so you can like, so you can just draw. I can draw on the text, circle where it's attention. Yeah, it would be cool. I like cool, but I also like useful.
Right.
So something big enough that you can see it at the back. Okay. I don't know how you want to manage that, Don. It's probably maybe an extra raffle at the
At the auction?
a raffle for the big TV.
We can do that. We can do that. Wish list.
We'll talk later. All right, go.
On that day there shall be a fountain opened for the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and uncleanness. And on that day declares the Lord of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, so that they shall be remembered no more. And also I will remove from the land the prophets and the spirit of uncleanness. And if anyone again prophesies, his father and mother before him will say to him, You shall not live, for you speak lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and mother before him shall pierce him through when he prophesies.
Ooh.
On that day, every prophet will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. Is it prophesies or prophecies? Prophesies? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. He will not put on a hairy cloak in order to deceive, but he will say, I am no prophet. I am a worker of the soil, for a man sold me in my youth. And if one asks him, What are these wounds on your back? He will say, The wounds I received in the house of my friends. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who stands next to me, declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. I will turn my hand against the little ones. In the whole land, declares the Lord, 2/3 shall be cut off and perish, and 1/3 shall be left alive. And I will put this dirt into the fire, and refine them as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them. I will say, They are my people. They will say, The Lord is my God.
All right, very good. So, a lot to talk about there. You obviously heard the quote, right? Strike the shepherd and the sheep is scattered. Quoted by Matthew and Mark, and also 1 Peter, and then in Revelation again. We use that as like a truism, I think. I don't know. Like, I've said that the way that Satan undermines congregations is by attacking leadership, either pastor or lay leadership, right? Because, especially if they're a public figure, they're out in front. Because that people then will say, hey, look, see, they're really not Christians. Okay. So, beginning, the day a fountain shall be opened for the house of David, right? And the fountain, for the inhabitants of Jerusalem too, for sin and uncleanness, right? So this is, that language of fountain makes you think of, for Christians?
Baptism.
Yeah, baptism, right, the fountain. But you notice it's for sin and uncleanness, which means it's a fountain of forgiveness, blood. Right? And I don't know if this has ever bugged you. It bugs me all the time. It brings me great comfort, actually, that Jesus mixes metaphors like I do, because then it's like assuring of myself, like I'll mix up. I remember hearing all these farmer kind of metaphors and sayings, but I always get them confused. I just blend them. Jesus does the same thing, right? So you're going to be washed in the blood of the Lamb. You're like, well, wait a minute. And it's going to cleanse you, and you'll be white as snow. Right?
How can that be?
Right. So what he's doing, that's John actually from Revelation, but that's good enough. Everything is being compressed down. All those pictures. The ritual washings in the temple, they had a bowl called the lavabo in Latin, and now in Latin. I don't remember what it was in Hebrew. Anyway, you wash your hands before you would do anything in church. That's always good practice, right? Mom, teacher, they all tell you that, right? Wash your hands before you have dinner. And then, so they did the same in the temple. They had ritual washings. And then they also sprinkled blood on the people, right? So that blood it was for cleansing. Which, again, seems kind of dirty and smelly, right? But it's because of that central saying of Jesus, or God the Father, actually, ultimately, that in the blood is the life. Right? This is why you don't eat animals with the blood in it, because their blood is dead. But if you eat the flesh of the Son of Man, you receive life because it is living. See the difference? All right, anyway. So you have this fountain, and of course it's water, it's baptism, it's living water, in Jeremiah, and of course it's blood too. But I think this is probably water and connected maybe still to the Day of Atonement, when the Lamb's blood is poured out for the sins of the people and then of the nation. But because there was a huge ritual washing that was part of that, where the priest would wash himself before that sacrifice. So we have it kind of conflated. Might actually be famous. This stuff's all over in Ezekiel too, which I kind of promised myself that's what we're going to do next. For better, for worse. It'll take a very long time. But, you got to do some. Just read things, like when you do your daily reading, by the way, just read rapidly. You can try to retain as much as you can, but like you would any other book, like how much do you actually retain? This is my problem with reading nonfiction, is I try to retain everything I read, and it just takes way too long. You can't. You just want to retain some things. And the next time you read it, you'll get different things. Right? Same thing with the Bible. Right? You can read it more than once. And you'll get new things every time. Right? Whereas if we go through it in Bible study, we might go into a little bit more detail. All right. So, I don't know if I need to say anything more about that. But again, I think this is ritual purification, priesthood, for sin and uncleanness. And then notice what happens. It's drawn in parallel to God removing all the idols in the land. All right, did that ever happen? That all the idols were destroyed, all idolatry was ended. The people only worship God. I love that story of who is it? Sarah? No, it's not Sarah. Maybe is it Rebecca? Who stole the household gods and hid under her pillow? That's a fun story. Yeah. It's like even the patriarchs, like their wives, and even the patriarchs themselves, they hold on to this. Obviously you have the example of, Aaron. And it's like, well, we just got out of Egypt. Hey, let's build a god like you had in Egypt. Your God just delivered you out of Egypt, and now you're going to go back to worshiping gods like Egypt. Oh, well, here's a golden calf. And Moses is like, okay, I'll burn it down, melt it down, put it in the water, and you'll have to drink it. And then you'll die. Oh. So God's going to remove all of these idols, so much so that you don't even remember their names. So, in one sense this has happened, I suppose, is that now every tongue confesses Jesus as Lord. Not yet, right? It hasn't quite happened yet. This is all future vision. When finally every tongue will confess Jesus as Lord, every knee shall bow, right? I think Revelation again. But also he cuts off all the prophets and all the unclean spirits from the land, right? And even if parents who hear their child prophesying falsehood, they get run through. I know. Yeah. You remember this? Some of this, I think, in the background. You have specific. You have one prophet in particular in mind, which is Elijah. It seems like he's recalling events from Elijah's own ministry. Because later on we have the camel hair. We have Elijah's cloak, right? The clothing of the prophet. Also John the Baptist, but it comes from Elijah. And then but running through the false prophets is exactly what Elijah did after they were defeated by God at Mount Carmel. He ran all the prophets of Baal down to the river and slayed them. He ran them through. It says it. It's explicit. And their blood was in the river. I don't remember how many. It was a lot. 20,000? 30,000? It was a lot, yeah. I don't know how Elijah did it either, except that the Lord was with him. Right, but here it's actually their parents doing that work of the true prophet running through the Old Testament prophet. Ooh, that's pretty intense, huh? And then, here it is. And it shall be in that day that every prophet will be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies. They will not wear a robe of horsehair to deceive. All right, so, this is the central question with John the Baptist, isn't it? Who did you come out to see? Right? This is Jesus' question about John. Did you go out to see a reed shaken by the wind? Did you go out to see a prophet? And he said, yeah. All right, he said, yeah, greater than that. This is the prophet of whom was foretold, right? Goes to prepare my way, and then he quotes Isaiah. But there is always this question, like if you dress up like a prophet and you talk like a prophet, are you a prophet? Or you could say the same thing about a pastor. You dress like a pastor, you use fancy words like a pastor, but are you the pastor? What's the defining characteristic? How do you know if that's the pastor or the prophet? Yeah, he speaks God's word faithfully, truthfully, right? Yeah, according to the Spirit. We would also say if he's been set apart by God for the task too. We call that ordaining. God ordained the prophets. He ordains people in the church today. Right. And he can revoke that ordination too for the unfaithful prophet or unfaithful pastor. Unlike what the Church of Rome teaches. Once you're a pastor, you're always a pastor for that. So if you do something terrible, then you just get shuffled off into a monastery somewhere. Yeah. Because you can't have you out with the people anymore. So then you can go just abuse your fellow priests. That's really good. Nice idea. Way to go, Rome. Anyway. Yes. And so then, but notice what it is. Because the Lord has come, and they're fearful of being run through by their very own parents, and their name is being cut off, the name of their idols that they worship, the ones that they preach. So then, these prophets will be ashamed. They'll take off the clothing, so they don't even look like a prophet. And when you come to them, they're like, no, I'm not a prophet. What are you talking about? I'm just a tiller of the land. The word there, it's only used in a couple of places. And one of the other places for being a tiller of the land we heard today in the Old Testament reading. Who was that? Not Abel. Abel's keeper of sheep. Cain, right. Yeah. And I don't think that's coincidence. Like, it's almost used nowhere except for here and there. So, they become like Cain. You see? So, what is false prophecy? It's not just soul crushing, it's soul murder. You're murdering the people with their false. Yeah. And then, like Cain, well, I'm not my brother's keeper. What did I do? Right? See what he's doing? The prophet's doing the same thing as Cain. I'm hiding away. I'm just a farmer. What are you talking about? I didn't speak falsely. I don't even have the right outfit on anymore. Oops. Yeah. And I've been keeping cattle since I was a young person. And then notice what the distinguishing mark is. And one will say to him, what are these wounds between your arms, or on your arms? All right. Now again, Elijah here comes to play. Do you remember what happened at Carmel? Yeah. So, right. I knew one of the boys would remember. Right. Yeah. Baal's not listening. Elijah's taunting them. And so then they danced even more, and they screamed louder, and they cut themselves. They lacerated their arms. This was the thing. This, by the way, the monks did this too, which I always thought was like, don't you remember in the Bible this was not actually a positive thing? But they would do this. They would, Luther, he would flagellate himself. They had their flagellum, which was like a rope with like sharp objects. Yeah. They would beat themselves until they bled or bruised as well. That seems like pagan worship, doesn't it? Yeah. Luther figured it out. Thanks be to God for that. Yep. All right. So here's the point. Yeah, you can fake it. You can say you're not the false prophet. You can take off the garment, but you still have the scars. Yeah. From your idolatrous preaching, right? So, but notice the lie. These, maybe not completely a lie, right? Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Right? So, I guess we call it a false house of worship, right? It was a house, and they were with their friends, but they were worshiping false gods, idols. And I also think of, I don't know, I can't think of another example of it, where somebody fakes it, like, oh, I was never a prophet. I mean, in the history of the Christian church, there's actually a very notable controversy. It was called the Donatist controversy. Anybody heard about this one? So the Donatists were collectively known because of this guy named Donatus or whatever, but they were collectively known because they, under advisement, the priests, they lied to the emperor of Rome when their lives were threatened. So rather than confess Christ and die at the hands of Rome, they instead said, no, we confess Caesar. Right? And I think under false counsel, they were given, like, you can lie to Caesar, because it's just Caesar. And then once the storm is passed, thinking outside, once the storm is passed, then you can come back to the church and it will be all right, right? Better to protect and save your life, even if it means to lie, right? This became a huge controversy. You even had to call a church council to try to resolve it. Because now the people are like, one, can we accept them back? Because they, often without repentance, they forsook Christ in a time of controversy, or a time of persecution, I should say. Right? Then the second problem was, people were asking, well, what about everything they did before? Their baptisms, are they still valid? Their preaching, was it still true? The absolution they declared, is it still absolution, even though they later... Right? And one of the essential teachings there is, for you, and this is a comfort to you, especially if you've ever been in a situation where the pastor was deposed or something like that, is that the... Can you not tear the cup apart, Patrick? Patrick! Stop. Put it in the garbage. Get behind the chair. And then James is like, am I my brother's keeper? Yeah. Watch him do it. I didn't ask him. Yeah. All right, back to the story. What are we talking about? Oh, the pastor's deposed. The efficacy of the acts of the pastor, whether it's his preaching, teaching, the word of absolution, the baptism, the supper, whatever it is not dependent upon the person. If it were dependent on the person, you'd probably doubt any of the things that you hear. Because you know me. Maybe too well. Right? All right. So, that doesn't say pastor isn't attendant to his faith and life, of course. But on the other hand, if there is scandal, which happens more often than you'd like to believe, the things that he said and done are valid because they're done according to the Word of God, under God's authority, regardless of him. Right? This delegate authority is exactly what the centurion says to Jesus. Right? The centurion says, Jesus says, I'll come to your house and I'll heal your servant. And the centurion says, no, you don't need to. Because I'm a man under authority. I say to one guy, go do this, and he does this, and do that, and he does that. And it's just the same as if I did it. So you just say the word only. Give it to me, and my servant will be healed. Delegate authority. You can just hand that word over to me, and I'll hand it over to him, and it'll be just as if you said it in person. Perfect, right? It's exactly true. And then Jesus commends him for it. All right? So, anyway. Guys, sit down, please. Patrick, sit down. Thank you. All right. Do you have anything else on that? Probably not. We can talk about flagellation and scarring and everything. That'd be fun. But let's move on. All right. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd. Right, so this is very similar to what we heard back in chapter 12, right? With, what was it, chapter? They will look on the one whom they pierced, right? So here again, we have another verse now quoted in the Passion story, like the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. So now we've had how many readings? Chapter 9, chapter 12, chapter 13, all quoted in Holy Week. Right. So Zechariah as a whole then is, I think, foundational to how Jesus would have us understand what happens in Holy Week because of the way that the evangelists quote it. You know. Anyway, so why strike the shepherd and the sheep being scattered? Why is God turning his hand against the little ones? Why are 2/3 cut off and died, but 1/3 left? It's kind of hard stuff to hear, huh? Yeah. I mean, here I think we're bumping up against the mystery of election. That God chooses. He dies for the sins of the whole world. That's objective, universal, objective justification, right? It's objective. It's stated as fact. It's true. Of course, you receive it subjectively. You're the subject of it. It's given to you as a gift. But objectively, it's for all. Subjectively, it's not received by all. Right? So the mystery of faith. Why are some saved and others not? Why do some believe and others don't? Why? This is, again, judgment on the last day. Why will 2/3 be cut off and die and 1/3? That's metaphorical, but anyway, be left.
Of the 2/3, those who were living in unrepentance.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Right? And do we know? No. Right? He's already, notice here what's really important too. He's already cut off the idols. They don't even remember their names anymore. He's already cast out the false prophets, the false shepherds. They're gone too. And yet, now what the prophet's saying is that Christ only remains my shepherd, and yet they reject him. Right? Now we see this, of course, in Jesus on the left. He's like, how does Isaiah foretell this, right? He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to those, well, actually, John. That's John, isn't it? But to those who did receive him, he gave the right to be the authority to be children of God. All right, that's John. 1 John. Sorry, I can't remember who I'm quoting. I have to think about it. Right? So he came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Why not? Right? The simple answer is it's unbelievable. Right? No, we sang this like in many places, in many in various ways throughout our hymns today. Is that no one would believe, no one wants to be saved, no one trusts in God. It's only by his giving, it's by his doing, by his the shedding of his blood, the giving of his spirit, that faith is worked in our hearts to believe and to trust. And is it everyone that will come and believe? No. Why is that? Because God is not powerful? No, it's because sin is rebellion against God. I think it's interesting. Did you ever think that Cain repented of his sin? He did. Yeah. He said that. Yeah. Yeah. He said, your face is. He repeats back to God exactly what God said to him. That's what repentance is. You said that you're not going to show your face to me anymore. And then he says to him, you're not going to show my face to me anymore. Right? And then God says, but then he adds a little bit at the end, right? Just like the prodigal son, he adds a little bit at the end, and whoever finds me will kill me. God did not say that. Cain repeats it, and God says, no, I did not say that. And just to prove it to you, I'm going to put a mark on you, and anybody who does try to kill you, vengeance. I thought of the band, the metal band. What is it? Something sevenfold. Avenger sevenfold? It's a metal band. You don't have to know. It's quoting Corinth. I will put my vengeance on them sevenfold. Right? They'll try to kill you. They'll have 7 and others killed. Right? So God protects Cain in repentance. He's still got a shot. Even though he offered sacrifice outside of faith, he repents. And God does bless Cain, by the way, because we don't know. So we treat Cain like he's some kind of pariah. He repents. He's not Judas. It's interesting, huh? Sometimes you wonder about like the cultural memory of the Bible versus what the Bible actually says. Maybe I should just read it. Okay. We've heard this picture before. Where did we hear this picture about being refined or tested? Anybody remember? It was one of the oracles. One of the visions, I should say. It probably tells me if I hover over it. No. It's not that. How about this one? No. We did talk a lot. Didn't we talk a lot about being refined by fire? I think we did. Okay, Bobby remembers. All right, this is a big picture. You see it in Ezekiel. You see it in Isaiah. You see it in Malachi. You also see it in, maybe that's where we talked about it, because we read Malachi in our daily prayer. That's probably where we talked about it. It's in 1 Peter. Jesus even uses the picture too. So to be refined by fire is a good thing. Except, 2/3 is burned off. You see? See the connection? Right. So there is a question, but does he mean this is as literal that 2/3 of people are cut off? Or does he mean it that's, I don't know, that's as little of you that's actually worth keeping is 1/3. The rest is burned off. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, ultimately what he's doing is, what God is doing, by this is interesting, by the shepherd, the companion being struck, and the sheep being scattered, is God is actually, here's the picture. Jesus is struck, right? He's crucified. How many people go with him to the cross? How many of his apostles are at the cross? Just one. Yeah, out of 12. One's dead, or going to be dead if he isn't already. Right. So we've got 10 missing. Who else? Yes, the women, right. 3 women, 7 women, who knows? I think it depends on what you count, right? But at least the mother. John tells us that. Right. So the sheep are scattered. And how many remain after the resurrection? Actually, more. Jesus actually restores them, right? And he does that like a refining fire. Yes, sir. It's too loud. Thank you. Yeah, it's like a refining fire. Right? So he refines you, burns off the chaff, the dross, or whatever you want to call it. He tests the gold. And then what's the net result? This is the beautiful part. What's the result of all this testing? Yeah, they call on his name, right? And they answer. And I answer them. I will say, this is my people, and each one will say, the Lord is God. Right? So we've had all this language of things that sound like passion, haven't we? And the purpose of it all, and here's the key, is the purpose is that you would call on his name, and he would respond, you are my people, and you would respond, you are my God. My Lord and my God. Think of, who said that? After they saw him who appears? Thomas. What? Thomas. All right. Yeah, my Lord and my God. Right? Which is a fulfillment of this verse, I think, at least in part, and then ultimately for you too. Now, how did we get to the point where Thomas says, my Lord and my God? We had the shepherd being struck. We had the sheep being scattered. We had the day of darkness and judgment. We had, in Thomas's case, a week of just unbelief, really, right? The darkness that brings. His faith is being tested, and what comes out the other side? My Lord and my God. Where does faith come from? Does it come from good wishes? From your heart? Yeah, it comes from hearing. That's right. Right? It's worked in you by God, through his word, by the Spirit. So, here and elsewhere, like I said, the other prophets use it like a refining fire. It's something that isn't pleasant. I don't know how to communicate this to people. I just say it kind of straight up. Somebody says, I want to join your church. And I'm like, well, it's not going to make your life easier, right? You might actually come to learn things about yourself you're not comfortable with. You sure you want to join our church? I mean, how else are you going to say it? Like, can we make false promises? And just say, well, if you come, you'll learn that you're loved. I mean, it's true. You'll learn that you're loved and that you're cared for and that there's other people like you. You'll have a family. And it's all very positive, right? It's all gospel message. By the way, though, there's this other part. For you to really actually treasure those things, God shows you how you don't want to really listen to him. And he'll declare his judgment against your sin. And actually, as much as it's a nice place to be, actually, Christians say each other too, just as much, if not more. So it's kind of a hard sell, isn't it? But maybe a picture like this makes more sense. You know? It's like going through the fire. Every time we gather, it's like going through the fire. And we're fine. You come out. Yes, you come out better, but it's the Lord's doing. And it's always pleasant in the process. It has its moments. Kind of like marriage or something, right? It has its moments. Most of the time. I know. I mean, that's the same story, right? People who present marriage as like some kind of like fairy tale thing, which I was sure last night where they had two characters, Ken and Barbie, she was a blonde. It was a little too obvious on the nose, which the characters even acknowledge. Yeah, we know. It's kind of funny. But like, that's not the picture of living in the big house with a sports car. I don't know if you have a sports car. If you do, you can have one. That's not a problem. You understand what I mean? Rather, like, fortunately, I don't get called on to preach at marriages too often. Like, yeah, I'm going to tell you honestly what this is going to be like, right? Because you have two sinners that are put together into one flesh union. So it's like two rams. You've seen those rams, like on the mountain. And they just don't stop until one of them dies. And that's kind of what it's like. It's pretty honest. It's like just, maybe if you learn to say, you know what, wait a minute. I'm going to forgive you. Will you forgive me? Oh, okay. You don't have to buy that all the time. We can actually, that chair is broken, which is why you're not supposed to be on it. Yeah. Okay. Don't sit on the chair. Sit at the table like I told you. Thank you. When Peter uses this, he actually says it when he talks about the refining fire. We can actually just go there. Let's see. I think it was linked in one of these buttons. Find that. First Peter. There it is. Look at the reference here. Alright. So notice, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his abundant mercy has begotten us again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that does not fade away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith for salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. How's that for a run-on sentence? Right? In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials. That the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom, having not seen, you love. Though now you do not see him, yet believing, you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, salvation of your souls. Of this salvation the prophets have inquired and searched very carefully. Right? So this is a lovely section on this. It's a baptism sermon, by the way, because you have all that, the gift of inheritance there in chapter, or beginning verse 3. But you notice, what is God actually takes the faith that he gives to you as a gift, then he puts you through trials to test that faith, the very faith he gives. And by test, he doesn't mean to see whether you're going to fail. By test, he means, think back to what we read in Zechariah. Testing is another word for, I don't know, like if you put in a new light in your home, what do before you walk away? You see if it works. That's right. You see if it works. Right? You test it. Right? So to test is to try, or what was the word here? To refine. Right? All right. Good. And then that gets us to 14, which is where we'll end next time. So we're going to finally get to heaven. How's that? So we went through battle and exile and cross. We did all this today. Cross and resurrection and faith and trials until the coming of the day of the Lord. Good? So we'll do that, and then we'll be done. I know it's Labor Day weekend, but girl, where are you going? Yeah, exactly. People who cancel Bible class just for anything, it's like, why? I mean, if you're not going to be here, you're not going to be here. That's fine. Right, exactly. Two or more. Preferably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to turn on my microphone today. Oh, that was nice of me to put it in my pocket, though. It looked like I had one. All right, let's close with prayer, if we would. Oh, Lord, you have called us to be your children. You have given us faith. You test and try that faith, that it would be refined, that we would always call upon your name in every trouble with prayer, praise, and thanksgiving. You have called us your people, and we confess you as our God. May you keep us in this faith today and always until the day of your return. In Jesus' name. Amen. I pray for it. Amen. I got an idea. Why don't we get rid of the broken chair?
Yeah.
Good idea.
That might be good.
Oh.
No chair.
Oh.